Hi, it's Lance Edwards. All right, this is my video summary on Chapter 2 titled Citrus, Cattle, and Cash. And I'm actually here filming this, broadcasting to you from our home, Old Florida home here in Old Florida. This is my stilt cabin in the wilderness that I wrote about in Chapter 1. Now, you can see the piers. These are the stilts. The piers, the house is actually 16 feet above me. When 5 feet above sea level. The Gulf of Mexico is right over there. So I've chosen this spot because down here I've got a map of Old Florida. This has actually been done by Brendan Cadall, who's a great Old Florida artist, and I found this and I had this put up here. It's great. And I'll use this map to talk about the locations where I speak about in the book. Now, we're talking about Old Florida. Old Florida can be found all over Florida, particularly in the book. It's Central Florida, which is up in here. You can actually see there's a citrus symbol and some cattle right here. And down here in South Florida, this is Tampa Bay over in here, Anna Maria Island. Down here is Charlotte Harbor, and our home is on Palm Island right here. The 10,000 islands of the Everglades I spoke about in Chapter 1 is this area right here. Chokoloskee is right down here. And so Central Florida is where the main part of the story occurs. The Armed Occupation Act was passed in 1842, which was done to motivate people to move to wild wilderness of Florida. And that act basically said for any able-bodied man who owned a gun and was willing to operate it, if you moved to Florida and were willing to settle there for 5 years, the government would give you 160 acres of land on one condition. You cannot live any closer than 2 miles to one of the Army forts that were present there because the Seminole Indian Wars were going on. So there were forts scattered across Central Florida. Fort Meade, which is about right here. This is south of Lakeland. Lakeland is my hometown. Fort Meade is south of there. A number of my family came out of Fort Meade. Fort Fraser was in Lakeland. Fort Myers is down here. These were forts that were generally about one horse ride day apart on the wild frontier. So the Armed Occupation Act 1842. In 1848, my great-great-great-great-grandfather, James Alderman, is the first settler to come south of the Alafia River, about right here. And he settled there. And he created the ford across the river so the wagons were ford. That area now is known as Alderman's Ford. It's actually a county park, Alderman's Ford Park. And we have pictures of that. I talk about that in the book. But at this time, Florida was a wilderness. It was as much the wild wilderness as the Wild West was at the time. And what was there for these settlers that came, these early pioneering families, was citrus and cattle that had been left by the Spanish explorers, the Spanish conquistadors, back in the 16th century, had left cattle and citrus, which actually citrus is not indigenous to Florida, nor is it indigenous to Spain. It comes from China. So there's a whole story behind that. But this is what the pioneers found, and this is what they developed their economy around, in addition to farming, was citrus and cattle, hence the title of the book. Now you can see I have around the map here, these are citrus labels. These are actually labels I've gotten. The digital version had them put on wood. These labels over here, these are my family's labels. This is the Golden Topper brand of Edwards Pritchett Tillis. This is the Golden Honey brand. This one's in the book. This is Red Dawn. This is Blue Dawn. This is Blue Dawn as well. And the way these labels were used in the citrus industry is, and these are from 1935 time periods. These are 20s to the 40s. Citrus was shipped in the 20s to the 40s in crates like this. I'm talking about in the book how my great-grandfather, Arthur Edwards, got his start nailing citrus crates. This is a citrus crate, and each grower or each brand would have the paper label put on the end of the crate. That's how they designated whose fruit it was. And actually these colors have meaning with regards to the grades of the fruit being shipped. And that was how my Edwards side of my family, and actually both sides of my family were into citrus and cattle. In the book I talk about the Edwards side, 3 generations of Edwards and the citrus that was really started by my great-grandfather and really expanded by my grandfather, Tillis Edwards. And I tell the whole story in there, and he became very influential in the Florida citrus industry. Actually, he was instrumental in having citrus orange juice placed into Disney World. There's a character called Orange Bird that is the only character in Disney that is not in a Disney movie. Orangeburg was created because of the relationship with the Florida Citrus Commission, which my grandfather was a member of and very instrumental in getting that deal with Disney. It was actually signed October 22nd, 1969. Talk about that in the book. And really, he was, this is a common theme in the book, as it should be, is these were just everyday people, simple, hardworking people who bet it all. My grandfather dropped out of college in 1936, 37 to go in the middle of the Depression to go work in the family citrus business. And from that start, ultimately, that 20-year-old college dropout was trusted with the Florida citrus industry by the governor of Florida when he became a member of the Florida Citrus Commission. So it's one of the classic as it should be stories in the book. Now, that's on the citrus side. On cattle, again, cattle was left behind by the Spanish conquistadors in the early 16th century, and the cattle they left behind were very hardy. They could adapt to the Florida heat, the mosquitoes that we talked about in chapter 1, and the cattle that today are actually known as the breed is known as Florida cracker cattle. I'll talk about this in the book, and also explain how cracker, the term cracker, some people use cracker as a derogatory term. It's a term of pride as far as I'm concerned, because yes, I am a Florida cracker. Cracker is derived from the early Florida cowboys who could crack their whips with such precision. Those where the cracker term came from. That's why you have Florida crackers, you have Florida cracker cattle. And we talk about that. Matter of fact, Frederick Remington was here sketching those Florida cowboys. There's one of the sketches in the book. And then I also talk about with cattle, my connection with my same grandfather, Tillis Edwards. He was in both citrus and cattle. His ranch was called the Double Diamond Ranch. And a lot of meaningful stories occurred there. I talk about that when we just go Boy Scout camping there, hunting there, which is a later topic in the chapter coming up on guns and birds. And there's one more thing we talk about in this chapter. There's a lot of different critters in Old Florida, and one of the most, let's say, famous ones is the skunk ape. Florida has its own Bigfoot, and here we call it a skunk ape. Lives up in the Green Swamp near the Double Diamond Ranch, and my cousin Jay Edwards actually produced a film that has characters named after my grandmother and my grandfather, with a cameo appearance by Nana, my grandmother, who's actually the topic of chapter 4 of the book. So this is a really fun chapter. It goes into a lot of depth at the heart of Old Florida. It's called Citrus, Cattle, and Cash. Hope you enjoy it.